My youngest child was born. She was very healthy, and then she had an adverse reaction to a vaccine, and at the time of her diagnosis, the medical professionals we were at the time trusting, their guidance to us was find coping skills. This is your future. The main focus was find a solution for where she will be cared for when you pass. And she's about to graduate with a degree in accounting. So I would say she's doing quite well. It became very important to me that other moms and dads, other parents could see that there's other options. There's hope. You don't have to just settle. You can keep fighting, which I think is our inherent desire when it's our child, especially, or someone we love. You don't want to give up and settle for. I saw them go from wheelchair or walker to walking. I had a gal with MS who went from not having balance, she needed a cane, to going back to her love, which was dance. I witnessed other parents like us who would break down crying because one of the ways that they can wake up is by providing them with oxygen. However, you're limited by your under hyperbaric pressure with the oxygen dissolving. That means that it can pass through the walls of your veins and your arteries. And brilliantly, if somebody has, let's say they have some tumors growing, this will help because most, like say cancer, most cancer cells are
Okay, Pat, it's so good to have you here. And it's so dynamic because for those of you that have been watching, you know that oxygen is my #1 need in life. And Kat is going to come in here and explain how to increase our quality of oxygen, what it does for the body. Before we do that, Kat, I want you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you even got involved with the whole hyperbaric chamber and oxygen increase in the body.
You betcha. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Dan, for the invite. I've been breathing my whole life. I'm very, very addicted to it. When my youngest child was born, she was very healthy, and then she had an adverse reaction to a vaccine, and it led us down a very different path than we had been on when it comes to looking at your health and the medical environment. And we were in a support group for parents with children who are on the autism spectrum. And a father came in who had a son who seemed to have similar condition as our daughter. And he said one of the things that really made a difference for his son was hyperbaric therapy. And my late husband and I had been active scuba divers, so we knew about hyperbarics, but we had no idea that it actually had healing benefits possibly for neurological conditions. So we started our research then, found a local doctor who offered hyperbaric therapy in his office. And we went in there, and long story short, it was such profound improvements just for such a simple therapy compared to all the other things we had been trying desperately as parents. And that began our journey. We've learned a lot, and it became my world.
That's fascinating. So what were you doing before, sadly, the effect of the vaccine on your daughter? What were you doing before that?
You mean for business?
Yeah.
Real estate. I had rental properties and land development, working with buying properties and subplatting them and developing them for construction. Very different than the medical world, for sure.
What was your dream as a girl growing up?
I wanted to be a veterinarian.
So
Yeah.
there's always been that part of health to you as far as a young girl growing up and seeing health, and then we get thrown in different directions in life for
Yes, we do.
different reasons. And I've always found in here, Kat, the greatest success stories come because of the need, not because of the want. And suddenly you had a greater purpose, which, I say, we meet our destiny on the road we walk to avoid it. Like you went onto the real estate and suddenly you're thrown back in. So it's beautiful. How's your daughter doing now, by the way?
Well, she's about to graduate with a degree in accounting. So I would say she's doing quite well, considering the fact that at the time of her diagnosis, the medical professionals we were at the time trusting, their guidance to us was find coping skills. This is your future. The main focus was find a solution for where she will be cared for when you pass. And so it's terrifying as a young, parent to think about something like that. Are you saddling your other children with a special needs child? Who's going to take care of it when they age out of the school programs and all the assistance offered there? And it became very important to me that other moms and dads, other parents could see that there's other options. There's hope. You don't have to just settle. You can keep fighting, which I think is our inherent desire when it's our child, especially, or someone we love. You don't want to give up and settle for a mundane existence. You want to help them reach their full potential.
Yeah, well, congratulations to you and your husband as well, because it's so easy to sit back and just accept what we're told. And I didn't know that story about you and your family. How old was your daughter when she had the reaction to the vaccine?
She was 18 months.
And she's now how old?
She's now 21 years.
What a beautiful story. I mean, if nothing else, you've done an incredible job as a mother.
Thanks.
And yeah, it blows me away, which, yeah, just huge congrats. I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that would turn around and get goosebumps, because look at the other road that you could have taken. And not only did you help your daughter, I know, because we met at a convention where I saw the incredible products that you have, and you're changing people's lives. You didn't just stop at your daughter, it's now moving on.
Yeah.
What would you say outside of your daughter, and we're going to get to the oxygen in a minute,
Sure.
is the reason that you continue to do this? What's some of the stories that you've experienced, or what drives you? Because what you do is not easy. I know you got these big hyperbaric chambers, oxygen chambers that you take around. It's a lot of travel, and then at the conventions, educating people and speaking, as well as getting people to do it. Why?
So after we started treating our daughter, and then of course diving into the world of hyperbaric therapy and seeing the science behind it and understanding that, joining the International Hyperbarics Association and meeting these other wonderful healers in the industry that utilize hyperbarics, but also things like red light and ozone and biomats, and there's so many things. It just was a mental explosion. I went back to that doctor and I started working in the office for him, helping with the hyperbaric side of things. And I saw people come in with, post-stroke. I saw them, and it sounds so corny, but I saw them go from wheelchair or walker to walking. I had a gal with MS who went from not having balance, she needed a cane, to going back to her love, which was dance. I witnessed other parents like us who would break down crying because their child finally said, "Daddy." And you just, I don't think, can be exposed to things like this over and over again. For 12 years, I worked in the clinics without becoming passionate to spread the word that this might help. It's not a cure-all, but it's a help most. And seeing the miracles of oxygen it's moving.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of blown away right now, because I wasn't expecting this to go in this direction, with your own personal story. So amazing. So you talk about the science. Let's go into that. Tell me, let's start off oxygen. What does it do for your body?
Well, it is essentially the fuel for our cells. And as you know, we have brain cells, skin cells. That's what we're comprised of, that and water. But that's another story. The thing that our cells need to function at their utmost is oxygen. And the current system that we're born with is you inhale the air, and it's about 21% oxygen on a good day. And your body is able to maintain about 6% of that breath, exhaling the rest of the oxygen with your carbon dioxide, the nitrogen, etc. That oxygen is in a gas form, so it needs to be carried. And the circulatory system is the courier system. The blood cells will bind with those oxygen gas molecules and carry them throughout the body, carry them through your veins and your arteries. And it's a wonderful system if it's all in working order. But when you have areas of inflammation or scar tissue, if you have occlusions, congestion in the arteries, for example, that's a traffic jam. And that can lead to negative results when you don't get the fuel to all the parts of your body. A diabetic who has poor circulation in their legs, for example, over time, they might have 100% oxygen in their hand here, but their big toe is getting 57% oxygen. The tissue starts to necrotize or die. They have to have it amputated, sometimes their entire appendage amputated. There's things that can go so wrong when your cells don't get the fuel that they need. So with hyperbaric therapy, they've harnessed the simple laws of Boyle's law and the laws of oxygen or gas under pressure. There's Henry's law, and you can find all this on my website and I'm sure there'll be links. But if you take a gas and you put it under pressure, depending upon the gas, it requires different amount of pressure to do this, but there's a reaction to that gas. It will actually dissolve into the liquids it's in contact with when under pressure. And oxygen does not take much pressure for this to happen. So you breathe it in, goes in your lungs, alveoli, goes into the bloodstream, pressurized. The blood, the plasma is the liquid. It touches that and it dissolves. So that enables your body to carry more. You're not limited by your blood cells. You're not limited by the rate that your blood is flowing, because your plasma becomes hypersaturated with oxygen because of that pressure that you're under. You can breathe extra oxygen all day long outside of pressure, but you're still limited by your circulatory health until you are in a pressurized environment.
Crazy, because I know my father was a scuba diving instructor, and one of his best friends growing up was a deep sea diver, where they spend a lot of time obviously decompressing after being down in the decompression chambers. And I was fortunate enough to scuba dive. What's the dangers of doing it wrong? Because as much as we're going to come back and talk about the benefits, we also know that there are dangers in putting yourself in atmospheric pressure. Tell us about some of the dangers that are in there.
So there's different types of chambers, and so I work with both the portable or soft shell, they call it mild hyperbarics, which run at the 1.3 atmospheres. It's the equivalent of being about 11 feet below sea level, or the bottom of a collegiate pool without the water. And then there's higher pressure chambers, and they can go to the equivalent of 30, 50, hundreds of feet deep. The dangers come with the higher pressures, so that it requires more overwatch. The chambers that we put into homes are in the 1.3 pressure, that 11 feet below sea level. The dangers are very slim. It's more about comfort, discomfort when you're pressurized. A commercial airline, if you're flying a Alaskan Airlines, you're going to be at 11 psi, pounds per square inch. At a portable chamber, a 1.3 chamber, you're at 4.4 psi. So it's actually less pressure than a commercial airplane. An airplane is a hyperbaric chamber. So if you're cleared for flight, you can do that pressure very safely. Now, if you go into the higher pressures, there are some risks. There's risks of, sure, being scuba diver, you're familiar with the bends. That is the same laws of physics that operate, that I explained earlier, Henry's law, Boyle's law. The nitrogen gas takes more pressure in order to dissolve. So if you go 30 feet down, that nitrogen starts to dissolve, and which is fine. It's fine to go down, but that's when you have to slowly go back up and really watch over the nitrogen going from its dissolved state where it's out in the tissues into a way that it can process out of your body safely. And that's why scuba divers have to be very careful about how often they scuba dive, when they combine it with flight, and so forth. But with the mild, that's not a risk at all. And then the other risk would be barotrauma, ruptured eardrum. That's if you come up too fast, same as scuba diving. You don't have that risk with the low pressure, as long as you just follow the manufacturer's instructions, very simple. But with the higher pressure chamber, you need to be very cognizant of the rate that you're depressurizing so that your ears, your eustachian tubes don't have the opportunity to rupture. We don't want that, obviously. But other than that, claustrophobia is a thing for a lot of people. As long as you know how to operate the chamber, you trust the people that you're working with, that's able to be diminished.
So I know the mild chambers, they're FDA approved, correct?
There are, to my knowledge, to date, here on New Year's Eve of 24, the 3 companies in the United States that are FDA cleared are Oxy Health, Summit to Sea, and Newtown. Nobody else. There are chambers out there, unfortunately, that are coming in from other countries that are not FDA cleared, and I do caution people on that. It's not so much that I'm a huge supporter of FDA, but I do believe that the overwatch on the materials used, especially when you're in an environment where you're actually drawing in whatever you're breathing deeper into your tissues than you normally would, I think it's pretty smart to be aware of what these materials are and whether or not they have toxic potential.
Yeah, and I agree. And as much as I'm not FDA, I'm not a big proponent of, because it's FDA, it means that it's great. I do think that it does set a standard. And like you said, we're doing things for our health. We want to make sure that they're meeting, not just meeting, but exceeding the standard that's necessary, because taking in the wrong organisms into our body can certainly take us down more than the benefits we're going to get. So it's interesting, because my whole thing is brain. I don't know if you know about my brain injury that I had before, and part of my brain died. I had to learn to recover it. And that's why I put oxygen so high, because the brain is our power force. From an oxygen point of view, every breath we take in is roughly about 20% to 25% going directly to the brain. How can you, by using the oxygen chamber, how does that directly affect brain health?
So, as we talked about, the cells, including your brain cells, need oxygen to function. When there is damage to the brain, a concussion, a stroke, near drowning, etc., brain cells generally don't die. In the last decade, they've discovered that they go into a dormant state, a sleeping beauty. They fall asleep in a deep sleep. And one of the ways that they can wake up is by providing them with oxygen. However, you're limited by your circulatory health. And in the case of a stroke, oftentimes it means that there is clogging of the major arteries, which slows down the feeding of those brain cells. Now, under hyperbaric pressure with the oxygen dissolving, that means that it can pass through the walls of your veins and your arteries, and brilliantly, it can pass through your blood-brain barrier so the oxygen can get up to the brain regardless of the quality of your circulatory system. And that's why it's so amazing. The most recent studies in the last 5 years out of Tel Aviv, Dr. Paul Harch in Louisiana State University, regarding hyperbaric therapy have shown promising results when it deals with early onset dementia or even Alzheimer's. And definitely my case, my personal experience has been with a neurological condition with autism. But the oxygen getting up, passing that blood-brain barrier, getting hyperoxygenation into the brain can help wake up those sleeping dormant cells and help them function once again.
Can you over-oxygenate?
You can. There's such a thing as oxygen toxicity, but that would require being in some of the chambers that I have been exposed to. You're sitting in 100% oxygen. And when you're in 100% oxygen in a chamber, you have to be testing for your oxygen levels in your blood and make sure that they don't stay too high. Basically, what they do in the hospital setting, for example, is an air break. So you're in 100% oxygen, and then you would be breathing ambient room air for a while and then go back to the oxygen. At the mild pressures or the chambers you're going to have in your homes, there's no risk of oxygen toxicity, because even if you're using an oxygen concentrator, at the most you're delivering a 98% oxygen concentration with a mask or a rebreather. And at that level, there's no risk of toxicity, nor is there a risk of like fire, like combustion, where with the 100% oxygen, it's a little more risky with that as well.
Yeah, because again, when I used to race bikes, would spend a lot of time altitude training. I had an altitude chamber in my home. So I wanted to increase the red blood cell count, be able to train at sea level just by going outside the tent or sleeping at nighttime. If I increase my red blood cell count and then I increase my oxygen intake or vice versa, how's that going to affect me as an athlete or just in everyday life?
So that is something that with the athletic, like the Olympic water polo team, Olympic track team, the rowing team, I've talked to their medical professionals at times. I've also helped to get chambers into their gyms, and they also had a hyperbaric component to their training, which is where you're saying you're reducing the oxygen, increasing the red blood cells. I wouldn't recommend it for the layperson, but if you understand how to do it, it's phenomenal, because you build up those red blood cells with the hypobaric, and then you just jam that extra oxygen in with the hyperbaric, and you're able to get exponentially more oxygen to the tissues. So you will fatigue much later than normal. You're able to push past the plateaus that you reach as an athlete, and it just is it's a phenomenal way to blast your personal records as an athlete.
Yeah, and again, I don't know what the testing's done in there. Obviously, this is the first time we're talking about this, but from a health point of view, they haven't really tested outside the athlete, the mixing of, altitude. Or could you, let's just say I had a cabin up in Big Bear and I'm up at 6,000, 7,000 feet, and then I bring in an oxygen chamber into here, the hyperbaric chamber. Is that, just as a layperson, is that good? Because we're used to that. That's what our body's used to. So now we get the benefits that an athlete would be using under, control conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the first mild chambers ever created was the Gamow bag, which was created for the sole purpose of treating altitude sickness, because of that ability to saturate the body. with oxygen and help the people to get down to where they can get help from at those higher altitudes. So that was like a sleeping bag sized hyperbaric chamber. Obviously, we've evolved past that, and we still use those. Those you'll still find those up at the ski lodges. But yeah, if you're at a high altitude and you incorporate hyperbarics into it, you're going to be able to achieve more because your tissues won't be starved for oxygen. And if you train there and then you come down from the high hills there, you're going to, it's like a runner running with weights or a swimmer swimming with weights, and then they take that off. You know, it's definitely a wonderful way to increase your training.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see if there's health studies that go in there outside of the athlete at some point, because it only makes sense. If oxygen, being the most important for our system to live, could then be increased, as well as our red blood cell count, which obviously is going to have a dynamic effect. Be fascinating. I want you, if it ever comes out, I want you to call me and say, Dan, there's now specific testing done on this group of people. Because my next question is, people watching this and understanding, okay, if I have a better quality of absorption of oxygen into my bloodstream, into my cells, then now they can perform higher. What is the greatest group of effect that you've seen right now that should be doing this hyperbaric treatment?
I would say it's a broad net, because we're all running around depleted from oxygen, and we're all running around exposed to toxicity. And because of the detox capabilities of hyperbarics and the just the sheer mass improvement you can have in your body when you add the amount of oxygen we actually need, you can treat or improve a lot of areas. So that's a tricky one, because I have seen a lot of, up in the Northwest, a lot of mold issues and a lot of improvements with people that have been exposed to mold toxicity. In all of my traveling across the country, I have seen, of course, I'm very focused on the autism community. I've seen tremendous improvements in that community. But post-COVID, all the long haulers, all the people who had an adverse reaction to the vaccine, those people, when it comes to respiratory conditions, this is going to help them and has been helping them in many cases. So that's a tricky one to say. Anyone who is already doing something like IV therapy or a supplement, and then they add in hyperbaric therapy, they almost always see an increased positive side effect to whatever it is they're doing. I've treated folks that are sent to me from doctors dealing with cancer, for example, and vitamin C infusion is a very popular alternative and sometimes conjunctive therapy. And they'll do a IV vitamin C, and then within a few hours do hyperbaric therapy, because it'll help carry it further into the tissues. Well, yeah, that's a difficult one to answer, because it truly can help so many people.
This brings up a question in me. Is it better to do the oxygen treatment before they have the treatment with the doctor, or after? Because you said after they've had maybe an IV or some sort of infusion, they then come and do it. Is it better to do it beforehand?
It depends on what you're doing treatment-wise and what your goals are. If the goal is to disperse the nutrients or the vitamins, all of that further in the body, then you would want to do hyperbarics afterwards. If your therapy, let's say you're a chiropractor, you would want someone to do hyperbarics before, because it will help make the sets easier when they're bone setting. There's less inflammation, so things will fall into place better and they'll stay longer. So kind of depends. I tell people, think about what your goals are. Hyperbarics, an hour at the mild pressure, will do the equivalent anti-inflammatory of about 40 Motrin or ibuprofen without the toxic response to your kidneys or livers. So it's a tremendous amount of anti-inflammation going on. Where would you like that before or after your treatment?
That's huge. Let me say it again. Anti-inflammatory impact of about 40 ibuprofen
Yes,
in about an hour.
about 24,000 milligrams. And that is a directly from Dr. Dan Rosignol, who's a MD in California, that he states that an hour at 1.3 ATA, or the 4.4 psi, same thing, does the equivalent anti-inflammatory of 40 Motrin. And that's huge, and it's painless and simple without those toxic side effects or possible side effects. It's a wonderful therapy. It's a standalone, but it also works really well when you combine it with other things.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, like you said, without the toxic side effects that you would get from the chemicals that are being put in your body. So, have you ever used it for headaches?
I have, yes. Migraines, things like that, are almost always related to either inflammation or toxins exposure. And so when you get oxygen into the tissues, like into the brain area, the more you have oxygen, which is meant to be in the body, the more it will force out things that are non-indigenous to the body, tell them to flush out. So this is a detox. It's important for people to hydrate after their hyperbarics, because you want to flush this stuff out. But yeah, we had in clinic, I remember a number of people that were very migraine prone that would experience relief. In one case, I had a gal who, she had a migraine that had not ceased for over 48 hours. And she came in, and within 40 minutes, it was gone. And I can't even fathom how difficult it would be for someone to function, to think, when you're under that level of pain nonstop. But seeing her relief and seeing her smile was pretty, it spoke for itself.
And did that stay once it was like cleared? Did she have repeat episodes, or was it longer in between, or was it completely gone?
For her, she treated, I would say we saw her for a while. We saw her about every month, every 2 months. But instead of having it last for days, it would end right away. Now, it comes down with things like that, chronic conditions, it comes down to what is at the root of that condition. If inflammation is, then you can reduce the inflammation. But if you've got a football player, they come in for a traumatic brain injury, and you heal that or help heal that TBI, and then they go back on the field and they get another one, it truly does depend on what's at the root of the condition.
That makes sense. Age. Is this, so for example, I know you've got these great chambers that you can actually sit in. It's not always having, we think of it, especially when I was scuba diving, we always saw them as these long lay down type of things, or you could sit a little bit up in them, but they tend to look more submarine like. And the one that I saw that you were showcasing at a convention I was at was more the sit up. Could a mother take a baby in with her? And if that's the case, what's the effect, or are there benefits for a baby?
Benefits are for every body that is in the chamber. They've used these kinds of chambers to treat animals at the zoo. I had a client who used it to treat his beehive that had, I'm not even joking, it's crazy. But yes, back to your original question, a mother could go in with a baby. In fact, we've treated women who are still pregnant, and the baby is still in utero. It's very safe therapy. As I said, anything that you're cleared to, like if you're cleared to fly on an airplane with your particular condition or at your particular age, you're safe to do hyperbaric therapy. And I think the oldest person that I personally treated was 97 years old. That was my great-grandfather.
Beautiful.
The youngest would be in utero, But we also had many, many, many babies come in with their parents and treat in the chambers. And, chambers come in all sizes. The efficacy is the same, but, it comes down to your budget and the space, all of that. But yes, the one you saw, you can put one or two chairs in, or a beanbag chair, a parent, couple kids. They all do the same thing. They put your body into a pressurized environment, enabling that oxygen to dissolve into your plasma.
Yeah, again, I'm so fascinated by this because as much as every answer goes down to, it's like I say, hydration. We've all got to hydrate. It's not relative to it, but so hydration will affect everybody at any age. But as a prior head coach on the Olympic Development Program, I saw that if kids are engaged in activity at a younger age, then there's not just a habit forming, but there's a physiological change that helps them to maintain a more athletic life because of the muscle development at a young age. As a baby, if they do this oxygen training early or as a young child, does that have any long-lasting effects, or if you then stop doing it, we then drift back into the same cellular uptake?
I would, I'm not a doctor, but a lot of experience in this particular field. I would say that if you start a child on things like hyperbaric therapy and proper hydration, proper nutrition, these fundamental things, if you start them as a child during that massive growth and development stage, fast forward, you're going to see healthier adults. And the reason for that is a lot of times the issues that we have as young adults and then older adults, they're wrapped around an issue that started at a very young age, and the way that the body has tried to cope with it, like the way you make a pearl, you've got that irritation inside that oyster, but that's kind of what the body does. And then we become, I've always walked this way. I had an injury when I was in 4th grade, and my body compensated for it, and now I have shoulder pain because I lift this hip. It's all connected. And so the sooner that you can create healthy environment and address any insults to that environment, the better the long-term benefits would be. Seems like it makes sense to me.
Absolutely. I don't think you mean to be a doctor, and there's something that I love is that you've got real life experience. It's not about the initials or the title, but it's about what really works. With looking at obviously oxygen intake with the body and the impact that it can have, is there any effect on your biological age? Does it have any reversal in that's been tested or proven?
The most recent exciting studies related to aging are coming out of Tel Aviv related to hyperbarics, and they're talking about how repeat hyperbaric therapy can extend the length of your telomeres, the things that, yeah, and I'll send you that.
Yeah, that's fast.
It is. And I mean, at 52, I have noticed that my counterparts in many cases who aren't doing things that are holistic, who aren't doing things like hyperbarics and just getting out and grounding out in nature, they're aging a lot differently than myself and the people that I work with, like you, who are more focused on taking care of ourselves. And so, I would say, I've seen in clinic, I've seen people show age spots reducing, fine lines and wrinkles reducing, your stem cell count increasing. In fact, many surgeons are using hyperbarics with surgery because it increases your stem cell count, and in a very natural way. And then they'll harvest your stem cells prior to surgery and then inject them into the surgical site. There's rarely does your body reject your own stem cells, so they're having better outcomes. And you can increase with 40 hours of hyperbarics a stem cell count of 8-fold of your own stem cells. So these are all anti-aging benefits.
Yeah, I- I'm a little blown away because when I look at the fasting and how we affect the stem cells, but what you go through to get to that point of stem cell activation and increase, you're doing this so naturally. I read, though, that athletes report sleeping in their oxygen chamber, hyperbaric, and yet the recommendation is like 1 to 2 hour max sessions, or between 45 minutes and 2 hours. What would the benefits be of doing more? And can you do more than one a day, or does the body max out at some point and then goes, okay, I need a refill when the gas runs out, basically?
Excellent question. The International Hyperbarics Association recommends that you can do a maximum of 4 hours per day, every day. 2 hours in the morning, a minimum of 4-hour break, and another 2 hours. So, and then I spoke with several of the doctors on the board and other doctors who are specialists in the field, and they said, yes, people sleep in their chambers. They have wonderful results. There's a small percentage of population that have mitochondrial dysfunction. Those are folks that their body needs time to process the effects of hyperbaric therapy. And so they're playing it safe. They said you could probably safely do 8 hours, but just to play it safe, we cut that in half. And then to play that safe, we cut that in half into 2 parts. And so it's just a precautionary thing because there is that small percentage of folks that would be too much for. But yes, and I will even admit, post-COVID, I had COVID and I slept in my chamber. I spent most waking hours in my chamber to recover because when I got through it, I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without stopping halfway. And that's from someone who normally is quite active. And I couldn't tolerate that. And so I just stayed in my chamber and did a lot of other, supplements, enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics, and all of that. But I was in that chamber nonstop. And now I'm back to my pre-COVID self.
That's great. Congratulations. How long from going into your oxygen chamber with COVID, how long did it take to get back to where you were?
I had it pretty bad. I was sick for almost 4 weeks straight. And I started treating the last week of those 4 weeks. So I would say it probably took me 2 to 3 months of aggressive treatments of hyperbarics. And then of course the doctors that I worked with were sending me, the zinc and iron, and I can't even go into the list. It's a long one, but I was taking quite a bit of holistic medicine and hydrating, and I would say it probably took me to really feel like I was back on my feet again, a good solid 2 to 3 months post-COVID.
Have you got experience of people that are suffering with long COVID and that brain fog that they start doing the hyperbaric treatment and then recovering fully?
Yes. The brain fog, and it's been very similar to people with MS who have the brain fog. We've seen the same kind of results. Within a couple weeks, the fog starts to clear in most cases. And there's the lung recovery, scar tissue internally healing up so that they can take that deep breath again without pain, without coughing. So yes, we've definitely.
Yeah, again, going back to the brain, every time you mention something with the brain or it comes up, I get excited. But once you've gone through long COVID, or you've come out, or you actually use the oxygen to heal your brain, does it go back to fully what it was before? And again, I'm not talking about if there's lingering and you stop too early and now it reactivates the areas, but let's just say you have a brain lesion and then use the oxygen, you see it healing in MRIs. If you stop doing the oxygen treatment, does that now just take on a life of its own and it's all good to go again? Or is it something that needs to be repetitively done, I
It
guess?
is. It's definitely case by case because if somebody has, let's say they have some tumors growing, this will help because most, like say cancer, most cancer cells are anaerobic. They thrive in oxygen depleted environments, and you saturate them with oxygen, they start to suffocate, die off, all of that. But if you still have those cancer cells active somewhere, anywhere, then you go back to a oxygen deprived lifestyle, then yes, they can take root again or they can start to grow again. So a lot of people just make this therapy much like a sauna, infrared, all of these therapies. They make it part of their life, part of their daily or weekly routine to be both preventative and proactive to increase their rates of a positive result.
That brings me down to price, because they're not cheap. And when I look at the size and what they do of the chambers, even the one that you had, and one of the things that I do endorse is that everything that you provide is made in America. And I know you mentioned earlier about looking at the quality. I've experienced that myself in other products, that there's still that standard and trust and ability to test. But I know the chambers are expensive. So if someone at home said, oh, I'm really interested, I want to buy one, we're looking at, the low end, am I right if I said about $8,000 up to like $50,000?
In the portable home units, 7,000 is our lowest price chamber. It's a one-person chamber. The largest one we have that's ADA compliant, roll a wheelchair or a gurney into multiple people, that one is about $21,000. So it's 7 to 21 range. If somebody has been in the military or immediate family member, then there's discounts on that. But yeah, it's an investment for sure. We do offer rentals and things they can look at to try it out. And there's many clinics and wellness centers where you can try it out and see if it makes a difference. Personally, my experience over a dozen years, if someone were to do between 3 and 5 one-hour sessions over the course of 2 weeks, they'll know if there's going to be a positive impact. And so it doesn't have to be a big investment. If they contact me, I'm happy to look for a place near their location where they can go and try it out and see if they want to invest in that. It also takes space in your home or your office. So there's that consideration as well.
Now, the nice thing is because they're FDA cleared, there's no tax, right? Because it's a medical. If you buy it,
Correct.
rent it, then obviously there's a tax induced, and then you got the shipping costs, etc. The current. If someone wanted to, like you just said, if somebody rented it just to try it, then you'd know within a couple of weeks.
Yes.
This happens. But what's the typical cost? I know it's going to change a little bit depending on where you live. But what's the typical cost for a treatment for an hour at a provider?
It definitely is location specific because I've seen clinics in Provo, Utah charging $100 for a treatment. And I've seen clinics in LA or Hollywood charging upwards of $275 to $300 for an hour-long treatment. So whatever a quality massage goes for in your area, it's probably going to be about that price point for a hyperbaric session.
And so if somebody said, okay, I'm going to try this for 2 weeks, is it best to have a day in between? Is it better to have 2 days? Is it better to do consecutive days and then have a break? What's the best practice?
This is both a cumulative and a momentum therapy. So if your schedule and your wallet allows, the closer together you get those treatments, the more the snowball effect of blasting your body with extra oxygen can be. So if you're doing 20 treatments and you spread it out over a year, or you do 10 treatments and you do that in 2 weeks, you will have longer term, better benefits doing them fewer sessions close together.
And what's the, I don't like to use this word, but it just comes to mind. What's the die-off time frame? So I went in, I did 10 sessions in 2 weeks. How long will that increase of oxygen sustain my body to perform at a higher level before it starts resetting back to where it was?
So when you do your first hour-long session, that oxygen is in the body, and it immediately, as you get out, it starts to dissipate. It's in there for 24 to 48 hours. And then over time, you'll run a little bit more saturated. But the key is when you do the hyperbaric therapy, you're reducing that inflammation in your body, and you're able to absorb more oxygen through the normal means, like you're doing and I'm doing right now, sitting in our office. And so you're able to have better circulation as a result. But it's not like if you do 20 sessions, you're hyperoxygenated for 2 months. It doesn't work quite like that, because it does start to dissipate, which is why most athletes will do hyperbarics when it comes to training before their training session within a few hours, so that they can utilize that extra oxygen. And then they'll also use it afterwards to detox. And especially like my weight trainers that would come in, they've been really pushing themselves on that. They need to get that all out of their body, the lactic acid and all of that. So they'll do hyperbarics afterwards for recovery.
Yeah, recovery is so important, because it's not just to have a better workout, it's injury prevention, letting the body continue to go on. Is the impact of the oxygen that we take in, is it going to change someone's ultimate level? Because I think I look at it and say, we've all got our potential, and then we underachieve on our potential. Is there a way that it could make someone taken from an average athlete into a better performing athlete just from oxygen intake?
I would say if you look on Google or Yelp and you type in an athlete and the word hyperbaric therapy, or HBOT, you'll find a lot of athletes that credit hyperbarics with their success as well as recovery. If you're able to operate with more oxygen in your body, you're able to achieve more. You're less limited by your muscle endurance because you've got more. So I would say yes. I think that athletes who embrace and incorporate hyperbarics into their training program achieve more long term. And as long as they keep doing that, they're going to keep on growing.
So can you give me a guarantee that as a weekend warrior on the bike, that if I get a hyperbaric chamber and I take that, I'll start winning every race?
I can guarantee that you'll probably start beating your old times and scores on things. But yeah, it kind of depends on what your opponents are doing, right?
Okay, that's it. I'll have to try it. But it's more than that. Okay, so someone's in a hyperbaric chamber. What are they going to feel? I know from some of the research I've done that the temperature can go up about 5 degrees. Tell me some of the other things that they're going to feel.
So when you're in a hyperbaric chamber, the pressure causes the molecules to become more active. And so yes, for every body that is in that chamber, it generally will go up 5 to 7 degrees. So it gets a little warmer inside. Most people, like myself, I run a little chilly, so I love that. Man, I live in the Northwest, so it's chilly up here. But other people will like to add a fan. We have air conditioning units that you can get with your chamber, or you can just throw an ice pack in a pillowcase and cool down with that. It's not that difficult to compensate for the temperature. The first few minutes in the chamber, the first 5-7 minutes, depending on your comfort level, it feels sort of like landing in an airplane. Your eustachian tubes, your ears will, people call it popping or adjust. You can swallow, do the Valsalva. There's a lot of techniques. Most people have flown on a an airplane and they have gone through the landing of an airplane, so they understand that sensation. And the difference being on an airplane, you're at the mercy of the pilot, but you're the pilot when it comes to doing hyperbaric therapy. So if you go, oh, I hate flying, it always hurts my ears, you can actually slow down that process so that your ears have a chance to adjust. So you feel the ears adjusting, you feel the temperature change, and then you're going to be getting more oxygen into your body. It's in that gas form and then it's converting into a liquid form. Your blood cells, your red blood cells are still taking in oxygen, but your plasma is also carrying oxygen like a river of oxygen. So a lot of people say they feel floaty, tingly, sparkly. I've heard all kinds of different terms for it, but you feel buoyant. Even though you're in a pressurized environment, most people feel very buoyant. Now, my daughter, who had been nonverbal when we were doing her first series of hyperbaric therapy, now at 21, she tells me that when she's in the chamber, it gives her the same emotional sensation for some reason as her weighted blanket. And all I can think of is it is putting you molecularly under pressure. So there is a squeeze going on, no doubt. But while I'm feeling floaty, she's feeling safe. And that's a benefit to her.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, Karen, who has used the oxygen chamber. She really enjoyed it. So she had a almost euphoric feeling, but while she was in there was tingling going on. Does that say you've had enough? Is that the beginning of the effect? Do you continue? You know, at what point do you say, okay, my session's done, or I should stop, or I can keep going?
The traditional treatment time is about an hour to 2 hours. Some doctors that I work with say 90 minutes is the magic point. At 45 minutes of pressure, your body is usually considered fully saturated. And that might be where she's feeling that tingle, like, okay, I'm full. But staying in longer won't harm her. It's just icing on a cake. The happy feeling that you speak of, that is probably attributed to the increase of serotonin, the happy juice that happens with hyperbaric therapy. For me, that was an aha moment with my daughter, because obviously she was too young for, to go in by herself. So we would take turns accompanying her in the chamber during her first 40 hours of treatments. And this is in the Pacific Northwest, where I struggled with seasonal depression for years. And this was in mid-November. It was what we call here the long dark. It's just gray and cold and that wet that gets to the bones. And I was always very sad during that time of year. And I was treating with my daughter without knowing any of these other benefits, just trying to help her with the autism issues that we had, the leaky gut, anyway. After about the second session or the third session at the latest, my husband looked at me and he goes, "You're smiling a lot more lately." And I said, I feel really positive. And that's when we started looking at, holy smokes, this is actually improving my mental happiness, my joy.
At what point did you go from, okay, I'm having the treatment, I need to get my own in my house? How long was that transition?
So the doctor that I started working in his office for, and I was doing so because I couldn't afford to continue to treat my daughter, but we needed that. We'd spent so much money on so many things to try and help. In exchange for treating her, I was putting in a few hours in the office, and that's how it all started. Another story. But this was an older doctor, and he retired, and he offered for us to purchase his chamber in the clinic. And we thought about it, and we thought, well, this is a stretch, but we got to, we can't pass up this deal. He was willing to have us make payments and such, but we thought about all the people that we had met and the people that I had become very their issues became very important to me. Their children were like our child, and we wanted to be able to help more than just our family. And so we joined up with a few other families and opened up a tiny little clinic and put that chamber in there where we could all treat, and then we could pay for it by, charging treatments, having it as a business, but also as a wellness place for us all to use. And I guess we didn't get a chamber in our own home for the first 10 years because we would just go to the clinic. We'd bring our kids to the clinic and we'd treat there. But not everybody has that luxury or that opportunity. And we did decide to get a chamber for home when our staff were so hooked on using them, and it was so busy during the day. The only way we could treat our family was to have one at home so that we could do it at any time of day.
And you wouldn't go back, would you?
No, I will always have a hyperbaric chamber in my home.
So another thing I guess that comes up is how simple it must be to use, because you're not a doctor. The family families you partnered up with aren't doctors, and yet you could still get the benefits by understanding the simplicity. But the simplicity of the machines really doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, they're made for home use. They're FDA cleared for home use, and they are crafted in such a way that you can treat by yourself. There's a remote device. The zipper can be done on the inside or outside. You're not trapped, which is really important for people like myself who, for various reasons, I have a predisposition for claustrophobia. A near drowning as a child led to that. And so in an elevator, I can panic. In a hyperbaric chamber, I don't panic because I know that I can get myself out very easily and very quickly if I wanted or needed to. So yeah, they've come a long way in becoming simple.
Yeah, I've got so many people that I know that are claustrophobic, and I never used to be, but I almost drowned in a submarine. And that was, I don't know how I made it out, but yeah, so even going into an MRI, getting that type of stuff is a mental prep that you've overcome. But I'm presuming that I know the ones that I saw have windows in them, so people feel that freedom that the outside's right there. And like you said,
Yes.
You talk about serotonin.
Yes.
Are there chemical reactions within the brain or the body that comes from doing this?
You have, yes, the release of serotonin. You have the increase of stem cells. You have a restructuring of your cells. So your cells, depending on which cell they are constantly breaking down and recreating themselves, right? That's why we shed skin, for example. That happens throughout the body, and different cells take different durations to do that. And when you're doing hyperbaric therapy, you're helping the cells to have a better, they repair. And so when they replicate, they're replicating a better version instead of a deteriorated version of themselves. So instead of, getting worse. Chemically, I don't know if there's other chemical reactions besides those things. I would have to look that up. But I don't think there is. I think it's just more oxygen pushing out things that don't belong in the body, and then improving the health of the things that are in the body.
Could you work out in there? Like, could you do push-ups? You could do sitting in the chair again, does that have more of an impact on them? I'm asking all these questions because I'm just fascinated, right?
Well, so there's a lot of things. Obviously, yes, we have athletes that work out in there. We have people going through PT that'll bring in a training device to build back their leg muscle after surgery, things like that. But when you're in parasympathetic state, when you are at that stage of either sleeping or that very relaxed, almost meditative state, your body goes into a healing mode that is profound. That REM sleep that you get, that's when you do so much healing. And so I do encourage people that while yes, you can exercise in there, you can be on your laptop and get some invoices done or emails done in there. If you want to reach the best results, you will do nothing in there. You will sleep, or you will rest, or you will meditate, or you will just spend time with yourself or your loved one in there. And I think that's when we have seen the best results, because you go into that parasympathetic state and allow the body to do the healing that it needs to do.
Yeah, I just had on Stephen. I don't know if you've heard of a product called Katsu, which is a blood
Yeah.
yeah, it's blood flow restriction training where you just do it. Be fascinated to try that and see what results we get with the blood flow restriction, which is very safe.
Yes.
But then increasing the oxygen. Okay, I'm going to put that on my to-do list now. So this is it's all exciting. There was something else that just came up to me as well while you were talking about that. Oh, eating, drinking. Obviously, like if the temperature's going up, you want to have water in there. You don't want to dehydrate. Then you'd mentioned leaky gut that we know has to be repaired because of the impact that it can have on inflammation going all the way up through the blood-brain barrier into the brain. Is it okay? Does it impact what you eat inside, or once you got more of an oxygen uptake, the healing effect on the gut? What happens with the food that you ingest?
So the nutrients are able to go further, get further. The hydration, the water that you take in, is able to be carried further. We recommend people not eat a bunch or drink a bunch right before their treatment, because you are in a pressurized environment. That can be uncomfortable. We don't have bathrooms installed in our hyperbaric chambers, but hydrating during or immediately after is definitely very good. If people are trying to get certain vitamins and nutrients into their bodies, then we tell them, eat either an hour before or immediately after hyperbarics, and that will give you some positive results with that.
If it absorbs the nutrients better, does that make it more dangerous if you have a bad diet? Because if you go in there and suddenly come out and you grab a candy bar and a soda, which we know isn't good for you, shouldn't be doing it, and yet the effect is impactful no matter what your diet is, right? Because they're oxygenating the body. If someone comes out and then does that, is that going to have more absorption in and have a more negative effect?
I think it would cancel out a lot of the positive effects. It would be like if they got out and lit up a cigarette. They did do some healing in their alveoli. They did bring good oxygen in, and then they're putting trash in. But I will say this: if you cut out the hyperbarics out of your scenario and they just grab that candy bar, they're worse off than if they had done the hyperbarics and then the candy bar. As far as absorbing more nutrients or taking it further, it's also at the same time pushing out toxins, which essentially is what you're doing, putting toxins in. So, ideally you have a balanced diet and you avoid cigarettes and junk food and all of that. But if you take the rest of the picture of how you're going to live your life and you add in something like hyperbaric therapy, red light therapy, ozone therapy, you're at least putting more weight on the scale of a healthy choice to that.
Yeah, I think, and again, that everyone looks at cost, everyone looks at, the value of the investment. And this goes with so much about what I believe in so much, and everybody that's been on the podcast, yourself included. It becomes a lifestyle, but it's not a restrictive lifestyle. It's if you're going to invest in eating better, we also want to increase our cellular activation, our potential. If we're putting the time into exercise and joining a gym and working out, we want it for a specific reason, which is to live a better life. And that's where, again, going back to what you provide, what you do is invaluable. And I'm looking forward to getting on a more sustained hyperbaric experience, without a doubt. One thing that I always finish with, if you could leave one message to the world, something you could impact, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be about it, but it could be anything. What's that one message that you'd love to give to them?
The investment you make into yourself today will have exponential benefits to your future self. And I think it's really important that you think about yourself in the full timeline of your existence. And the fact that, you think so often, if when I was younger, if I only would have done this or that, well, you're where you are right now on that timeline, but your future self is there. What are you doing for that person? What are you doing for you?
I love it. And one thing I love is that, as you said, if you get one in your house, or you get one that you may even want to start your own small business in, you can use it with your family, you can use it with your friends. Word can spread, and the impact is 100% natural. I don't know if it's
Yes.
more powerful than that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I look forward to continuing this conversation in the future, and as I go through more experiences, I'm sure I'm going to ask you to come back on here again and explain things. And as you learn more things, please let us know, because again, I appreciate all that you're giving.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And yes, if you or anyone have any questions about it, either I can give you the answers, or I'll steer you to someone who can. Happy to do that.
Sounds great. And I'll put all the links and everything in here for people to be able to reach out to you as well. Thanks so much for the education.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
And you only find out about this usually as you go through life. And usually when you end up with some issue or problem or concern, whether it's your health, whether it's your happiness, and you kind of explore what's happened back into the past in your own journey. For anyone who's out there as parents right now and wondering what the impact is on their kids, and what's really interesting about a lot of the research we've done over the last 20 plus years is look at how different people are. And so we aim to understand a person, not just biologically, but also it's such an important piece to understand that the psychological impact for parents is huge, and your little human that's running around your household is already got his own little wiring system that's being created and evolving as he or she grows. And if you can understand the framework that you're working in, I was in my early 20s, and one day I just woke up, couldn't breathe, couldn't move, thought I was having a heart attack. And at that time I was already, I'm sure there's many people listening to this that have had plenty of misdiagnoses and tried all the diets and the things, and it's all very confusing these days as to what's going on. But the fact is, we're all unique humans, and there is an exact thing that's going to be out there for you. I believe what you believe, Dan, about we're all born superhuman. And it's just, for me, it's about finding out exactly, which is what Shay's kind of designed to do, is to help you understand exactly who you are right now, and then give you what's the next step for you, just to meet you where you're at, to say, hey, if you're suffering and you're in back pain, 8 out of 10 pain all the time, it's very difficult to just share unconditional love and gratitude with people. It's very difficult. So there's no point in trying to tell somebody that. It's like, meet them where we're at, let's get you out of pain as the starting point. Hey, once you're feeling better. We had a lady who had chronic migraines, blood noses, headaches, rosacea, which is a lot of redness on her skin, scared to go out in public or how bad she looked. And